Welcome back again to Joe Stunner Boxing. How are you doing? If you're new to the channel, thanks for turning up. Please subscribe. If you hit that subscribe button, it's a big help trying to build the channel up. We're slowly, but very slowly, but very surely growing. But if you could hit subscribe, that's a big old help to us. Got a mug of tea on the go, so you'll have to forgive me for that. But I've just had my tea, and now I've got I've got a mug of tea. Okay, today's video. Well, I'm going to play the old Victor Meldrew, the old sod, who has a little rant today, because one thing that I've noticed for, well, I was going to say months, but it's probably years, is the amount of people, and I'm sorry to say it's younger people. I've got nothing against younger people, you know. I know a lot of them. I work with a lot of them. They're very mature kids, a lot of them. So, but anyone who's younger than I am, which is I'm in my mid-50s, is young. All right. So if you're 40, you're young. There you go. I'm the bringer of good news. But one thing I've noticed is the amount of moaning that is done by younger people, younger boxing fans. Excuse me. Yeah, the amount of moaning that young fans do, or younger fans do. When I say young, I suppose I mean anyone up to 30, maybe even 35. Oh, this fight never gets made. Oh, this is happening. And right, let me explain a few things, okay, from an older person's perspective, from a boxing fan who's followed the sport for well over 40 years, since I was a nipper. I'll explain a few things to you. When I was a kid, in order to watch a fight, unless you went there, unless you actually paid to go there, that was the first thing you could do. But if you didn't have the money, or what you had to do is you had to wait for a fight to be shown on TV, sit there at a particular time on a particular day and watch that fight and not blink. And if you needed to go for a piss, you'd have to rush between rounds and try and do it within the minute. There were no videos, you know, those old VCR video recorders, none of that. There was no YouTube, nothing. Okay, you had to be watching that telly at a certain time on a certain day on a certain week, and you look down the TV guide. All right, it's being shown at 7 p.m. on Wednesday. I can't do anything else then. I'm gonna have to watch it. The first fight I ever saw, I didn't really know what I was watching because I think I was only about 8. Was the third Ali Norton fight. And, you know, I liked what I was seeing, even though I didn't really know who these guys were. But what I remember about that was the controversy at the end, because a lot of people said Norton won, and I, having watched it many times since, I think he probably did win. But following on from that, once I got a bit older, into my late teens, early 20s, video recorders had come along. You know, the old tapes? You younger people, you ever seen those old videotapes? And in the back of Boxing News and Boxing Monthly and a couple of other magazines, there'd be little adverts that would say, you know, send a stamped addressed envelope, or maybe sometimes there'd be a phone number, and I'll send you a list of the fights I've got, and you can buy them. So you would buy these VHS tapes, okay, which would have all, if you could choose the fights, and some guy would put them on a tape for you and he'd send them to you. And you'd build up a collection. I had loads and loads of these old VHS tapes. I've still got them somewhere, but the tapes are probably rotted. I don't know. I ain't looked at them for years. And that's the way us fans, again, unless we went, I mean, I used to go to a lot of small hall fights. I used to go to, you know, the York Hall and various leisure centres and stuff like that. I even went to the Albert Hall a few times to watch the fights. This was back in the late 80s, early 90s. But I had this great collection of VHS tapes. Watching and that was my education, you know, from watching the fights. But again, there was no YouTube, no internet. Then along comes the internet and YouTube, and suddenly, wow, you know, you can watch fights at any time. Anytime you like. You're looking for a fight, you've not been able to find it. Suddenly, it's on YouTube. Fantastic, brilliant. You know, I was like, whoa, we've never had it so good. It's fantastic. No need for your VHS tapes. There was a DVD sort of interim period where we switched from the tapes to the DVDs, but you don't even need that anymore. You've got them all on YouTube, or, you know, and that brings us right up to the present. You've never had it so good. You can go and watch fights at any time. Even the more obscure ones are on there, you know. So there's that. But what about the televised side of things? Well, in the early 90s, Sky came along. It was in the early 90s or the late 80s? 1990, I want to say. Maybe 88, 89, that sort of time. Late 80s. Along comes Sky Sports. Along comes the satellite age. And suddenly they're showing boxing, not just on BBC ITV occasionally, very occasionally, but they're showing it on, you know, they're showing fights from America on Sky Sports. This thing called Eurosport came along. Oh, wow, what's on there? Steve Holdsworth, the grouchy old former pro from Watford, he used to do the commentary, no holds barred. He would tell it like it was. Great commentary. But you'd be watching European fights from America, the Blue Horizon, in Philly. They used to do regular fights there. Was it Tuesday night fights or something? Meanwhile, on terrestrial telly, boxing grew. So you had Frank Warren used to do shows, I think, on Wednesdays or Tuesdays on ITV. They were great. But you had more and more boxing on more and more outlets. Bring it up to the current day, and you've now got, now watching great fights, major events on your phone. You've got Sky Boxing, you've got DAZN, you've got Fight Zone, ESPN Plus, whatever the hell it's called. You've never had so many outlets for watching boxing, and in fact, you've never had so much boxing. Now, as far as the fights being made goes, that's nothing new. Fights being not made is nothing new. It happened before. It's going to carry on happening because there's politics in boxing. But that's nothing new. And when people talk about, the good old days, back in the 80s or the 90s, fighters were much better and fights got made. This is all nonsense. Yeah, they're great fighters in any era. But the idea that there was some great golden age, some eras are better than others. Yeah, I agree, because there's better fighters around, there are better fights. But the idea that, like, for example, with the Spence-Crawford issue, why don't they fight each other? They absolutely should fight each other. I completely agree. But it's politics that's stopping them from doing it. And yes, it sucks, but that's nothing new. It's absolutely nothing new. Bo never fought Lewis in the pros. They fought in the final of the Olympics and Lewis won, but it never got made, which is a real shame. And if you go way, way, way back, decades, if you go 100 years back, more than 100 years actually, you end up with the colour bar. You end up with, the black heavyweight title or whatever the nonsense it was. So you had this institutionalised racism, this racism that was ingrained into society, which prevented, God knows how many great fights from happening. Hence, Sam Langford and a few others, famous names now, but they never got a chance to fight for the title. So this is nothing new. Excuse me. This is nothing new, and it will carry on, unfortunately. But what I'm saying to you younger viewers is, you've never had it so good. And I know that the phrase, you've never had it so good, is often said by the people who've never had it better. But in this particular case, by the way, never trust a politician when they say that, you've never had it so good. Never trust any sort of corporate CEO or executive or any of those tossers. Never trust them when they say that. But I'm telling you, there's an exception to every rule, and in boxing, it is the exception to the rule. In 2021, when it comes to boxing, when it comes to the outlets for seeing fights, and when it comes to the culture, not so much the culture that exists, but the fan, the culture for the fan, you've really never had it so good. Trust me, from an old sod. So what do you think? You think I'm whistling Dixie? You think I'm talking nonsense? Do you think I'm talking sense? Leave your comments below. I'd love to hear them from all sorts of people, whether you're 20 or whether you're 60 or 70. I don't mind. Leave your comments. I really enjoy reading your comments. Let me know your opinions. I'm going to finish my tea. Enjoy the rest of your day. And of course, as always, cheers and take care.